We're going to talk about authentication and authorization in this video. I'm going to use a website as an example for explaining this. We have a website, and this website can be accessed by, of course, a browser. And then this is the user who is trying to access this website. Okay, so this website doesn't allow all the users. It only allows some permitted users. Okay, when the user is trying to access this website through a browser, what browser will do is it will send the user back to a login page where they can type in their username and password. So it will send the user back to a login page, and the user is keying in their credentials. They are actually keying in their username and password in that page. First of all, let's first understand why the browser is, the website is sending the user back to login page. Because the website is allowed to be used only by permitted users, the website needs to know whether the user who is trying to access the website currently is a permitted user or not. In order to find out whether the user is permitted user or not, it first needs to know who this user is. So to find out who's this user, it sends the user to the login page, and in the login page, the user is typing in their username and password, which is, by the way, is a way to prove their identity. So if they know that username and know that password, it proves that the user is who they claim to be. Let's say, for example, if we have two users, users A and B. If user A wants to log in as user A, which is themselves, then they know the password because that user has a password and that password belongs to that user and they know the password. So they'll be able to key in and prove that, they are indeed user A. But if they try to access the website as user B, for example, they cannot do so unless they have the password for user B. So this is why we need to keep the password a secret. So if someone else knows your password, then they'll be able to access any website in which you have that username and password as a valid credential on behalf of you. So they can sort of impersonate you and do anything that you can do on that website. Yeah, so this is one of the ways to prove the identity of the user. Okay, so now the user types in their username and password and they submits it. So it goes to the server again, which is our website. In this simple scenario, let's assume that the website has access to a lookup table. It's some sort of table. It could be a database table or simple file in the file system, something which has username and password. Okay, so when the user types in their username and password, it goes and cross-checks the username and password in this table. If it finds a match, then it is a valid user. Okay, so it is a valid user, and it also proves that the user who is trying to log in is, of course, who they claim to be. So if they have typed in the username and password for user A, and if that matches our record in the lookup table, then the website is going to assume, or the website is going to take that request as a request coming from user A, because it has validated the username and password, and that username and password does exist in the permitted list. Okay, so the next thing is, so now we have established the identity of this user. So we know that when user A says I am user A, we know that they are indeed user A, because in our assumption only user A knows that particular username and the password. Okay, normally username is not a secret, just the password, but username could also be a secret, right? So if you don't tell anyone, nobody knows that this is your username. Okay, so now next thing is we need to identify what this user can and cannot do. In some websites we don't need to know this because the website may not have any functionality differences based on the type of the user. So all the permitted users are allowed to do same sort of operations. So as long as the user is one of the permitted users, they'll be able to do anything that are possible within that website. But some websites will have different permissions, and depending on who the user is, they'll be allowed or disallowed to do some operations. So one of the easiest example to explain this is, think of this particular website as a blog website. So this is actually someone's blog, and you're trying to access the blog. And when you're trying to access the blog, let's assume that you need to, access the blog only with the username and password. Like Medium, after few free access to the Medium posts, you will be forced to log in, right? So think of that actually. When you are visiting the website or the blog as a visitor, you can read, you can probably post comments, but you cannot create, delete or update existing posts. Those can only be done by author. So we have two different type of users in this case. One is author and another one is visitor. So author can create, update and delete posts, but visitor cannot do any of them. They can just read the post. Okay. Now both of them, author and visitor, both of them are permitted user. They are allowed to access this site and they both will be listed as a valid user in our permitted users lookup table. But author can do more than what visitor can do. Okay, so we need something else to say that author can do this, but visitor cannot do this. This is where we come to authorization, which is called auth. So we have authorization, and with this authorization, along with this permitted list of users, we will also have for each of these users what is allowed and what is not allowed. So let's say, for example, for author, we'll say they can create, edit, update, create, delete, edit, delete, and they can also view. Okay, but for visitor, they can only view. They cannot do create, edit or delete. Okay, so we'll maintain this for each of the user along with their username and password. So now once the user's identity is established, which is authentication, we will find out what they can and cannot do, which is authorization. Okay, so once we know what they can and cannot do, we'll be displaying appropriate buttons and widgets on the screen, because if they are just a visitor, they won't see buttons like create, edit, delete and things like that. But if they are an author, they'll be able to see all of those things. So that is it. Then let's say, for example, the user is trying to visit another page within the website. Okay, now it's kind of inefficient for the website to request username and password for every page the user is visiting within that website, right? So they might be on, say, page X, and then if they move on to page Y, if we send them back to login page and ask them to log in again, it is waste of time both for the server and as well as for the user, right? So one of the things that browser does is, or this website does is, once the user is authenticated, it creates something called auth token. So which is nothing but a bunch of strings and numbers, for example. So which is basically unique within that particular website and for this particular login session. So if they come back some other day and log in with the same username and password on the same site, they might get different token. So this token is valid for a fixed period of time for this particular logged in session. Okay, so they call it session. So this will be sent to the browser and stored as a cookie. One of the advantage of cookie is that whenever a request is made from a browser to a website, any cookie that has come from that website will also be sent along. So when the website says, okay, store this cookie, the browser stores it. Then whenever we make more requests to the same website, it could be different page or same page from the same browser, those cookies will be sent back. So this is where the token and cookie is going to help us to avoid sending username and password for each page request. So once the authentication is done, the website is going to create a unique authentication token that identifies this particular user and this particular session. And by the way, there are some differences between session token and auth token, but I'm going to use them interchangeably here. But basically what I'm saying is when we have this token is valid for a short period of time. Let's say, for example, 30 minutes or 1 hour. After that, if you have not done anything for that period of time, then you'll be sent to the login page again and you need to start over again. Okay, so now we have this token. The token is sent to the browser and the browser stores it. Now if the user visits another page within this website, then they don't need to provide username and password. The auth token that is stored in the cookie will automatically be sent to the server, and the server will be able to see the token which is coming in, and using that token it will be able to identify who the user is, and it will also be identify what they can and cannot do. And this way, the user can continue to work on the website once they have logged in successfully, and the website will still be doing all the checks in the background just using the auth token. That is, it will make sure the user is still a valid user and they are only doing the things that they are permitted to do, but they don't need to send username and password. The user doesn't need to send username and password for each request. So that concludes this session. Yeah, thank you.